all the other pictures that I have that I have documented.
He's going to jail for this, so the rest of that can't leave anything about. But if anything else shows up, you can go take that paper down to headquarters.
There's not going to be anything else because she's taking him down.
I mean,
Put him under the jail.
He's going.
Under the jail.
Okay.
To begin with, I have two quick housekeeping matters for the channel. Number one, if my audio is bad, I apologize. If my video is bad, I apologize. My graphics card from 2016 crashed on me. I had to restart my computer and get it working. I'm going to be fighting through that probably the rest of the day. And that's also why, for anyone who's a longtime viewer, Tommy Tatum received a superseding indictment for January 6th. It appears to be about the flagpole. If you're a longtime viewer, you know who and what I'm talking about and why that's so interesting to people that view the channel. I have a video recorded for that, but I think it got messed up, the actual file. I might re-record tonight. I might not. My main focus right now is covering the Sarah Boone case because it is a lot. It takes a lot of my day to do this. So with that being said, I do want to begin with the state's request for special jury instruction regarding withdrawing from physical contact. Now, I've already tried to record this like 6 times and had issues and tried to fix my audio and video. So what I will say here is that I'm not going to read this verbatim. I'm going to tell you what this is. This is the state saying, here is the storyline of Sarah Boone of what happened that night, and they want to change the instruction. They believe that the standard jury instruction does not adequately cover the legal theory because this victim, physical contact legally, according to case law, includes restraint on Jorge Torres. So they want to just be clear, like when they come to the jury instruction about withdrawing physical contact, if he's still in the suitcase and can't get out, that is still considered physical contact. The state wants that added. Has not been brought up in court yet, I do believe, so there's no decision there. With that being said, let's get into the actual court. We are on day 5 of the Sarah Boone case, and it feels like it would never come, but the end is getting closer. The Owens is submitting the no contact order from yesterday. They had some housekeeping of their own. What do you know? And the defense is going to rest after submitting. Or the state's going to rest. Or no, defense is going to rest. Sorry, it's been a long day. Judge denies the renewed acquittal attempt by the defense. Sarah Boone was asked by the judge, were there no witnesses you wanted to call that your attorneys failed to call? No. No about evidence. No about she is satisfied with her attorneys, and Owens presents the evidence to the jury that the no contact orders. That was a big issue yesterday. If you didn't watch the video, basically, the state wanted to argue it was hearsay. The defense was willing to fight all the way to bringing in an expert, bringing in someone to testify that it was like a real document. And that had to be established, I think, before it could be argued if it was hearsay. And the state's just like, I don't want to subject them to that. The state calls Dr. Tanya Werner for their expert. She lists her education. She lists off her qualifications. She said psychiatrists prescribe medications to treat mental disorders. By the way, I'm so thankful that these notes did not get wiped. She's done thousands of psychiatric evaluations. She's done evaluations about sanity. She's done evaluations for both the prosecution and defense when it comes to battered spouse. Not all partner violence leads to battered spouse. The witness also has the DSM-5 with her and states that battered spouse is not in it directly. It would most likely fall under PTSD. She explains what PTSD is. I'm not going to read I'm not going to type out everything she says because a lot of this is just basic information that was covered by a previous witness, or to me, the fact that she used to work at this business doesn't apply to her testimony for our purposes, this channel's purposes. There are some agreed upon criteria for battered spouse though. If an experience is traumatic enough, if an experience is traumatic, it's subjective. And that's kind of a big thing I do want to say here. This case is based on feels. What do I mean by that? Because this is all about how Sarah Boone felt. Like we can believe if she's lying or not, right? But George is dead. It's not a question he's dead, and it's not a question he's dead due to Sarah Boone's actions. The question is she justified because of her feelings? And I think that is what makes this so messy. A couple can be in a violent relationship for 3.5 years and possibly battered spouse doesn't apply. As I said, it's subjective. Cycles of violence can be used to explain battered spouse. Save my fingers. This is a note I wrote. To save my fingers, I'm not going to go into super detail when it's the same testimony as yesterday. Abuse doesn't have to be physical or sexual. It can come in coercion or control. A man can be on the receiving end and become a battered spouse. So the man can be the battered spouse. It could come from controlling identification papers. It can come from gifting an item and still considering it belonging to the abuser. That is a direct reference to a bicycle that Sarah Boone gave to George, I assume, so he can get around, and then she claims it as her own still. The doctor did an evaluation of Sarah Boone and IDs her for the courtroom. She was evaluated October 2nd. So we get to see how her story changed from then. Prosecution and Sarah's lawyers were there. They went through her background. They did a mental status evaluation to see if she can fluidly think through processes. They went through the day of the incident. Talking about the 23rd, Sarah had an issue recalling what time they woke up. She said morning, but then said she wasn't sure it was morning. She said they both wanted to drink, but they wanted to vacuum and clean first. And they drank starting at 4 p.m. We know the drinking at 4 p.m. seems to not be correct. Puzzle, art. She felt George was frustrated. So he encouraged him to call his daughters, even though she knew they didn't like talking to him when he was drinking. So Sarah at this point is saying, George is kind of upset, right? So why don't we call his daughters, who will be upset if George calls while drinking? That's the way I took it. She then encouraged George to call his brother to explain why he pulled her down the stairs the night before, but he didn't explain that to the brother. Again, this is a call where, according to the brother and Sarah Boone, she was in the background talking about being choked. Now, am I misremembering, or is this another change in story about her being dragged down the steps? I thought she was dragged down the steps by her hair, but now it involves choking? I'm confused. They went and got another bottle of wine and cigarettes and drank more. So at this point, I want to say it again, I'm confused. Because I thought the later in the day trip, according to Sarah, was George going to get cigarettes, and then he came back with cigarettes and the wine. So I'm wondering now, Sarah said that they went, at least the expert saying that she said they went. Did Sarah possibly drive and she was just waiting in the car? Do they have like any cameras who prove or disprove that? If it is, I haven't seen it mentioned, right? That kind of perked up my attention. The same hide and seek story as before. She saw George trying to get into the suitcase. They were laughing, zipped him up. There's a cat outside my window crying. A bunch of neighborhood cats at the moment. They were laughing, and then he became angry and remember what it felt like when he was choking her. I think you can hear the cat. That's why I mentioned it. I think like a cat had a litter, like a feral cat. She said she took the suitcase, lost control, and it flipped. So she told her that she flipped it. She told this expert he stuck 2 fingers out and she hit them with a baseball bat. So we're back to 2 fingers, right? So this was another one of her inconsistent stories. Then she went upstairs and waited for him to come upstairs. Talk of alcohol abuse disorder. Alcohol can affect memory and actions. How alcohol affects battered spouse varies by person. Doctor based her opinions off of what she had seen. The doctor did not diagnose with Sarah Boone with PTSD. So this is where everything goes off the rails. The doctor stated she didn't diagnose Sarah Boone with PTSD. Owens wants to approach. The jury is asked to leave. Owens begins reading a transcript of the deposition. Owens is reading a lot. I'm not going to quote everything Owens says. You'll understand why soon. Owens reading a lot, and the judge has to call him out for skipping massive portions. They let Owens... I wrote it as ramble about generalized personality disorder and narcissistic traits being mentioned. Eventually, the state interrupts, and then the judge interrupts. The judge says this was caused due to a question about PTSD. So Owens is off in a whole other world. Now Owens starts reading about PTSD. Owen reads where he asked about Sarah having PTSD, and the doctor tells him she mentioned some things that come under it, but the doctor does not diagnose Sarah with PTSD. So basically, Some of the things Sarah said could fall under PTSD. The doctor did not make that diagnosis. Owens says she can explain why. If she can explain why, the expert says, no, I would need to look back through my notes and make a decision one way or another. So in the deposition, Owens asked, can you explain why you don't diagnose her? And she said, I'd have to go through my notes and then make a decision. Owens asked if that's something you might give an opinion on in the future after reviewing notes, and she said, I may. Owens says, okay, and you will let the lawyers know. And the judge asked, what is the legal objection? And this was kind of a core of a lot of this. What is Owens' objection that it's detrimental to his client's case, or is it based in law? Owens said he would not take that deposition if the judge hadn't given that deadline for the deposition. So basically, Owens is complaining about the deadlines in the case, that he would have maybe spoken to her again later after she got a review, but he didn't get a chance. He had to do it by that date. Judge asked again, what are the legal grounds for your objection? The judge is familiar with all the background and everything it took to get this deposition to happen. To me, it sounds like the judge is basically, look, I know where we've been, right? What are the legal grounds for your objection? And to quote him, I have quotes here, I don't know if there is a legal ground other than we had an agreement as attorneys. I would be notified as a change of opinion and a chance to take a second deposition. So he doesn't know if there's a legal ground, but he's kind of blaming the state that maybe they've hidden this, is what it seems like he's insinuating. And the state says they don't like the implications he's making. The state says they asked her yesterday if she changed any of her opinions, and she said no. The state's opinion is that it doesn't matter if Sarah had PTSD because at the time she zipped him up, she was laughing. She got angry after zipping him up. His opinion is the doctor would say the diagnosis doesn't matter because of what Sarah Boone said happened. The state isn't going into PTSD or narcissism because none of that matters. The state expects her to say it doesn't matter if Sarah had PTSD. Owens argues that he doesn't think PTSD doesn't matter, and the judge tells him that isn't relevant to this argument. I want to stop here. I didn't put it in my notes, but I just want you to understand how bad this was. This was, in my opinion, Owens realizing their case may have just fallen apart, and he's lashing out, and it will continue, and you will understand. The judge explains the state says that the state expected a different answer. What do you want me to do, Mr. Owens? So basically, the state thought she would just say it doesn't matter, but she said the answer was no. Owens wants a whole new deposition. State's talking to the witness now. Doctor says PTSD would not be related to this incident as Sarah Boone describes it. If there were prior instances of violence, would that change your opinion? No. If you viewed other materials based on what she said happened, would that change your opinion? No. So to me, we're not even arguing about, this is where my problem is with this. The doctor didn't diagnose Sarah with not having PTSD. She just didn't diagnose Sarah with PTSD. She didn't make a determination. She did not decide Sarah has PTSD, which is different than saying Sarah does not have PTSD. I hope that's clear. And Owens is trying to combine the two in his argument. Owens says that, number one, she's giving a legal opinion, and two, it is a discovery violation. And at this point, I made a note, I paused it. I am wondering how, if, as Owens calls it, this is a legal opinion and this isn't okay, what about his witness's opposing opinion that PTSD affected Sarah? Isn't that the same thing? If they basically have opposite opinions, and Owens is saying the other one doesn't count. I was confused. The judge asks, what is the legal opinion? Owens says that PTSD doesn't apply in this case. The state immediately points out that the defense witness testified that it did, and that's what experts do. The judge asks, where is that a change in deposition? The judge told Owens he has to read it and find the problem, and he hasn't done it so far. The defense never said, look at this, when they had the hearing. Owen gives a page and reads some lines. They have the question that we read. The question's read, basically for what happened earlier. Owens wants a different part of the testimony today reread. Judge says the state hoped the answer would be different. The judge asks if her opinion was different than the depositions. Owens says yes, and the judge asks how. So the state hoped for something else. So the state's not happy with this answer. How is she different than the deposition? Owens is flipping through pages looking for something. Owens reads more, and the judge is confused. And Owens at this point can't even remember how this started, and they have to replay. The judge has to stop Owens. He's freaking out. Owens is freaking out. I don't know a better way to describe it. It's got to the point the judge has to stop Owens and go through the events of the courtroom today and how we reached this point. It is that big of a mess in the court. So I'm sorry if you're like, I can't follow. Owens couldn't follow. The court reporter is rereading what's brought us back to this moment in court, and the judge is thinking. Judge has the last question and answer reread, has it read again, then they reread the deposition. Owens is up saying it's with a different answer. He needed to know about her opinion on PTSD and that it wouldn't apply if she had that opinion, and Owens wants her opinion struck. State says as far as discovery violations, the state doesn't think Owens understands what the answer would be and what that means. State says she will say it doesn't matter about PTSD at the time of the event. That is not a discovery violation. She was specific. If you have any questions, she will answer. She will. Owens did not ask. And here comes the next big part. Owens wants to be able to say, tell me everything, that you have any opinion on anything at all. And anything that gets mentioned that he doesn't think to ask should therefore not be allowed in. That's my takeaway. We'll get more into that. Owens started a rant, and the judge just stopped him. Owens needs to give specific portions to show the judge to consider. Let me see my notes here. So to me, she didn't diagnose Sarah with PTSD, and Owens is now trying to argue that she said that Sarah doesn't have PTSD, which are different things. I said this earlier. Owens doesn't like that she's going to say that even if she had PTSD, it doesn't matter when it comes to what Sarah Boone did, due to the words Sarah Boone used to describe the incident. The court is going to be having a discovery Richardson hearing right now due to Owens' claims of a discovery violation. The judge finds the state's violation was inadvertent. They do find the violation is substantial since the other opinions will be given to the defense. It did affect the defense's ability to prepare for trial. The judge asked if Owen wants it struck that she couldn't diagnose Sarah with PTSD at the jail, and Owens says it will come out during cross. So at this point, the thing that Owens objected to, he doesn't want struck. And the judge asked Sarah if she's okay with not striking it, and she is. So, I told you it's a mess. So what the judge decides to do is he's going to have Owens do a deposition right now in open court. Owens asked if the witness and state had a discussion about her testimony. Yes, last night, briefly this morning, less than 5 minutes each time. They discussed that the expert's opinion hadn't changed, so the state was doing their job. Owens asked her if the state told her it didn't matter if PTSD applied to the incident. The witness says, no, that was my opinion that it didn't apply because of the way she described that event. Was that your opinion when I took your deposition? Yes. When did you form that opinion? When Sarah described the incident. Why didn't you inform me? I love this line. You didn't ask about that, sir. Owens asked, do you have any other opinions you might express at the trial? Yes, he asked that. Owens said, you knew I didn't want ambushed at trial. He's kind of like playing the victim, right? Owens is the victim now. And he's showing it. He's angry. She says, you had a list of questions. I don't know all the information you want me to provide. Owens said, so because I didn't ask you specifics, you don't feel like you had to respond? She says, no, sir, I answered all of your questions. And said, I will answer any questions you ask. And Owens says she knew it was important for the opinion for the case. Doctor says she had a lot of opinions. She just such as she does not think Sarah Boone is suffering from major depressive disorder, but she didn't give that opinion either. So she's basically saying, look, I have a lot of opinions on a lot of stuff. You can't just, ask me to give every opinion I have on everything. That's not how this works. Owens is done. The judge explains this is a deposition. This is your opportunity to depose. So basically, the judge is like, are you sure you want to stop already to Owens? Like, he's trying to help Owens. Owens rage quit, in my opinion. Owens then complains his expert can't read this expert's deposition, and if it would change her opinion. The judge won't be striking the witness. Owens asks for all opinions, and she says, I am happy to answer any questions I am asked. So again, he wants every opinion she holds about everything, and she says, ask away. Owens claims she's refusing to answer the question. State objects to catch-all vague questions. You have to give specific questions. It is unfair and vague to ask everyone to just say everything. The judge disagrees with Owens that there is any hiding of the ball. Owens goes back to his deposition. The doctor wanted more time to reflect to see if she had enough to support or negate if Sarah Boone had PTSD, and she said she didn't have enough information. Owens asked if the expert asked about the specific things that could prove if Sarah had PTSD. There's a list of things criteria. Did she ask about those? She said she asked Sarah if she had anything else to share, and she did not. Owens, he's being a smartass. So that's a catch-all question, correct? Because he's referencing earlier. But there's a note I put. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're supposed to give out a list of checkboxes for a diagnosis and the person being evaluated answer each one knowing what it's for. That seems like an easy way to fake a diagnosis. Shouldn't those answers all come from natural questions and natural answers explaining the situation, not from individualized questions as Owens is asking? To me, it seems like Owens is like, why didn't you lead my client into this defense? Which immediately makes me wonder if that's what his witness did. Was she willing to ask Sarah over and over until she met the diagnosis? Remember, there were 9 meetings. Did they meet until they got what they wanted? Lucky for him, the jury's not here to hear this because he sounds terrible. No personality disorders when it comes to Sarah Boone to discuss. She found narcissistic traits. Owens tries to say the doctor is saying Sarah suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. And she says, no, she suffers from traits. She has narcissistic traits. So Owens is trying to put words in the mouth of this witness. I gotcha because you said narcissistic traits. I'm going to be completely honest with you. If Owens said he forgot his own witness said the same thing, I would not be shocked. Sarah suffered from alcohol abuse disorder. Sarah doesn't suffer from anxiety disorder. In the deposition, the doctor said anxiety disorder or adjustment disorder. Owens asked if she's changing her testimony. She says no, she doesn't know either way, but she's leaning towards adjustment disorder secondary to her legal situation. Which, if I am wondering, is if I think that basically means that Sarah isn't doing well mentally. She's not adjusting to jail. She's not adjusting to jail, and that's why she has this disorder right now. But she doesn't have an opinion fully either way. The doctor believes Sarah suffered from trauma because she reported she did. She said Sarah does not suffer from psychosis. Sarah does not suffer from acute stress disorder. Sarah suffered from intimate partner violence. The doctor says, and this is a big one, Sarah may meet the criteria for battered spouse. Owen says, so you agree she suffered from, and she said because she's met it in the past. So from Sarah's stories, she had battered spouse at some point in the past. Owen says, so you agree she suffered from battered spouse syndrome? Yes. And then the Richardson hearing ends. But Owens probably at this point thought this was a win, but remember, the argument is that it doesn't matter. At this point, the defense is upset that the 2 detectives that did the Sarah Boone interview, the one in the jail, are in the courtroom. The state says they asked if the defense would be calling them, and they were told no. So basically, you aren't calling them, it should be fine. The defense says they might be used in a rebuttal. The judge asks, what is your basis for use in rebuttal? And her lawyer, I want to be clear, this isn't Owens, this is another one. He says, I don't know. The judge asks for a legal basis, and the lawyer can't give one. But the judge does say that detectives need to leave. So he's just like, let's not deal with the issue. I felt like to me. Jury's back. We're going to finally, I'm excited, right? We don't have to listen to Owens anymore. State wants to strike the last response as non-responsive. Approach overruled. Regardless of an opinion, if anyone has that Sarah Boone suffered from PTSD or battered spouse syndrome, based on your evaluation, does PTSD or battered spouse have any basis in? Owens interrupts to object, and it was overruled, and the doctor says no. So it got in. Regardless of what anyone says, if Sarah Boone has PTSD or battered spouse, according to this expert, it doesn't have any basis on what she did. The describing of a good time, the laughing, it's not evidence of an imminent threat. Another approach, and the jury is asked to leave. The jury's gone again. It's a mess. The judge has the court recorder repeating questions and answers that just happened. Owens says that this is the question for the jury, and the expert shouldn't be able to express that opinion. The state argues it's an opinion of the set of evidence and testimony the defense has done. She isn't saying Sarah isn't justified. She's saying based on the fact provided by Sarah, Boone does not, that means that this does not apply. So basically, from the way I'm getting it, is that she's not saying that Sarah Boone wasn't justified in killing George. She's saying that she didn't do it because of PTSD or battered spouse. But whether it's justified or not, that's a question for the jury. If that makes sense. So it's two things. There is her mental state, and there is what she did. They're not arguing whether what she did or not was justified. They're arguing that her mental state did not cause her to then do the actions that she did. That's my read. Owens doesn't like this, of course, because it is a confusing topic for the average person. State says it's the same as two experts disagreeing about an insanity defense. It just happens to disagree with the defense witness. So State's basically just flat out saying Owens doesn't like that we have a different opinion. Owens says that this is totally wrong, and while talking, the judge asks him, but how does this have to do with if this isn't a valid legal opinion? The judge overrules the objection and just cites case law. So they bring back the jury, and the question and answer are reread to the jury. At this point, Owens begins his cross-examination. And I want to say he is noticeably angry. You can hear it in his voice. If you don't listen to any other part of the trial, if you can find like a timestamp someone has for his cross, you can hear it in his voice. You know how this has went. And the thing is, and I think I reference this later, the jury is hearing it. The jury doesn't know what happened when they were gone, but the jury can hear how he sounds. The expert goes through all the evidence she had to rely on. She listened to the defense's expert's deposition. She didn't listen to the defense expert's testimony or Sarah Boone's testimony. Objection relevance overruled. Why didn't she listen? The expert did not have time to do that. Owens asked her if she's aware this is a trial for murder. Objection sustained. The doctor reviewed text messages from Sarah Boone's phone. Owens said, would it be fair to say they weren't relevant? Objection. Approach. State asked her if the text messages informed her opinion about the inapplicability of battered spouse syndrome or PTSD in this case. It did not apply if Sarah Boone suffered from battered spouse. So basically, the defense was trying to get her to say that the text messages don't matter about anything. There must be something damning in them, right? There must be some damning stuff in the text messages that Owens doesn't want in, and the state gets to solidify that they just weren't used for her opinion on battered spouse and PTSD. She did review all of it before the interviewing Sarah Boone, though. Owens mentions about opinions she's going to express, such as narcissism. So he's trying to talk about opinions he knows she's going to say. Objection, approach. He comes back. Is it fair to say in your evaluation of Sarah Boone that the text messages you received from the state attorney, objection, overruled, are not relevant to your evaluation of Sarah Boone? She said she wasn't sure who sent the text, and that was mentioned in the deposition. So she can't really use it to make a mental diagnosis if she doesn't know exactly 100% who sent what. They said they're from Sarah Boone's phone. You agree? She checks her notes. State starts to object. The judge says, let him finish. Owens says he has another question. So the state's trying to object to something. The judge is like, let him finish his question. Owens talks about when to go off on another question. So the judge just makes him approach. And then we go back and the witness says that the texts aren't relevant to the evaluation. Owens asked her if there was anything in the text messages that caused her to pause and might have an impact on her evaluation. She says no. Owens keeps stopping her before she gives her complete answer to the question. Now, I need to explain here. Her answer is basically no, but no, and then there's more to it. Owens will not let her answer the question. Owens wants it to be a yes or no with no nuance. Or no, like, even like, he does not want her to give the answer she gave in her deposition. He wants her to just no and move on. Owen keeps making her say no, 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 and then eventually would not let, and after she agrees it was no, he moves on, does not let her give it. I don't think this plays well. I don't think this works for the jury. He's noticeably angry. He's lashing out at someone. If it matters to that particular juror, he's lashing out at a woman who he doesn't like the answers that she's giving. He admits he's cutting off her answer. I want to be clear. Owens says he knows there's more to the answer, and he's not letting her give it. And he's representing. You have to remember this. Owens is doing this while representing Sarah fucking Boone. At this point, to me, Sarah Boone feels like Owens, and Owens feels like Sarah Boone. He feels like an extension of what I expect Sarah Boone to have been like if she was trying to represent herself. I don't think it's going to go well. I don't think it's going to look well to the jury. An angry man, and remember, they've been pulled out of this courtroom multiple times due to Owens as well. They probably aren't happy with Owens due to that. Should they take that into account? No. Will they? They're people, right? Owens says at the same time, you said they had a volatile relationship. She has to correct him again, and that was not her full answer either. So again, Owens is not letting her give full answers. Sarah called George a fucking idiot for overdrafting their account, and messages show they had a violent relationship. You admit that had an impact on you expressing your opinion to the day that Sarah Boone suffered from battered spouse syndrome. Objection, approach, lunch is happening. So there's a break now. That's why I'm doing the video. That's when I finished these notes. I hit save. And I was about to hit record for this, and my graphics card crashed. So we're at that point. My thoughts. What's crazy about this case is, and I hate to say it, in my opinion, it's a case of feelings. And I don't like it. We aren't arguing whether Sarah Boone killed the man. We aren't. We aren't even, what we're arguing is self-defense, right? But according to the defense, we're supposed to accept this self-defense due to some wordings they've used before are Sarah's sixth sense about what's going to happen next. Her feeling. His tone. If you believe Sarah Boone is the crux of the issue in a lot of ways. Now, the state's arguing it isn't. Because everything Sarah Boone has said still means that it doesn't, that the battered spouse doesn't apply. But you have to get in the mind of Sarah Boone. And that's a problem. Because Sarah Boone is a narcissist. Has narcissistic traits. You know what happens when you list off these multiple traits that they say are traits of narcissism, and you tell that to the average person? They're going to view that person as a narcissist because of the narcissistic traits. So I'm probably gonna mess that up again later and just call her a narcissist, but that's what the jury is probably gonna be considering her. They also know Sarah Boone is a liar. A repeated liar who changes her story every time a new version helps her. We've seen it repeatedly. They have to take that woman, and for the defense, they have to believe her. They have to believe her about what happened in that middle part. They have to believe that now she can remember it when she couldn't before. They have to believe that Sarah was traumatized. That Sarah herself wasn't a hardened abuser who was not traumatized by any of the abuse she received. They have to believe Sarah about what she felt that night. A night that she has changed from she doesn't remember, but she does remember, but she only remembers parts that help her story. At the end of the day, it's about, do you believe Sarah Boone? Do you believe the feelings Sarah Boone says she was feeling? And then do you think those feelings justify what she did? And what the jury is seeing now is her lawyer enraged. If Owens had stayed calm, I would think Sarah Boone's chances would be higher. Not a lot, but somewhat. Also, I do want to mention, people have talked about a document where it was shown that there was an agreement with her lawyer for like the movie rights or whatever. So two things. Number one, I've seen the state ask for what is the financial arrangement and are there any conflict of interest. I've not seen a response from the defense. So if that exists, I can't find it at this time. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying I haven't seen it. Also, there's been talk of the Son of Sam law, or at least Son of Sam style law in Florida, where if Sarah is found guilty, she can't profit off of her story. And this makes me wonder something. Theoretically, if Owens and his team have an agreement with Sarah where they get the rights to the book deal, the movie deal, the TV series, whatever, if that is the agreement, are they subjected to the Son of Sam law if Sarah Boone loses? Because if they aren't, they get to profit even if they fail. And if that's the case, I can see why the state would question conflict of interest, because you don't want her to lose and then Sarah Boone to appeal claiming my lawyers were ineffective or screwed up my defense on purpose because it would be a more money-earning story if I went to prison. And I think that's all for part one. I just kind of wanted to put my thoughts out there, things I've been reading and looking into. Again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning. I hope I didn't drag on too much when I talked about the J6 story that happened today. If I find time in between breaks where I've already recorded and I can get the video done on that video might even be out before the Sarah Boone video. Purely if I have the time. So if you see it, it's already out. If you don't see it, it's probably coming at some point. But that's the end of part one. Before I get into the update, I do want to talk about another jury instruction real quick that was put forward by the state. This is their request. They're asking that according to the evidence, the decedent crawled into a suitcase during a game of hide and seek with the defendant. The defendant then playfully zipped the suitcase shut. Whether this is completely shut per the photographic evidence or nearly entirely shut per the defendant's testimony is a jury question. The defendant says that both she and the decedent were laughing about this until the decedent stated he could not breathe and became angry. This in turn made the defendant angry, and she decided to intentionally leave the decedent in the suitcase for 2 minutes to teach him a lesson about how it feels when the decedent makes the defendant feel like she can't breathe. Video evidence shows the defendant recorded the decedent trapped in the suitcase, saying he can't breathe, and the defendant mocked him for 2 minutes and 3 seconds, and they have the timing. She then recorded a second video for 22 seconds, which shows the decedent still trapped inside the suitcase, asking to be let out. Prior to both of these videos, a still photo was taken at 11:03:31 with what appears to be the decedent inside the suitcase. This is well past the 2 minutes the defendant claims she intended to punish the decedent with. Eventually, the defendant goes upstairs to sleep with the decedent still strapped in the suitcase. The decedent died because of these, but for the decedent died because of these, but for the causations by the defendant, and she is the proximate cause of his death. Based upon Everly v. State, the state requests the following instruction be given to the body of the instruction for second-degree murder and any of its lesser included offenses. In order to determine whether the death was caused by the criminal act of the defendant, the state must establish beyond a reasonable doubt that 1. Before the defendant's criminal act, Jorge Torres' death would not have occurred. 2. Jorge Torres' death was not beyond the scope of any fair assessment of the danger caused by the defendant's criminal act. And 3. It is not unjust or unfair to hold Sarah Boone criminally responsible for the death of Jorge Torres. So, jury instructions are going to be a whole new mess we're going to get to eventually. So we've returned after lunch. The state is ready for the jury, but the defense isn't. Owens wants to talk about the deposition of Dr. Warner. Owens is reading and complaining that the witness might have more opinions, that the witness, if she wants to add more, she can. The state suggested Mr. Owens was going to ask for another deposition at trial, which Owens says wasn't true. This is them reading from the past depositions. They had an argument about this at the deposition. Owens wanted a second deposition. Owen calls for a complete dismissal due to prosecutorial misconduct, and the judge immediately denies it. Now, by the way, this might have to be broken up. There's going to be a delivery soon. So just so you know, there might be a weird break in this. The judge gives his reason it's denied. The judge reads where Owens skipped over an important line in the deposition, so I'll read that line. So, from my understanding, it's real people talking, so the words aren't perfect. From my understanding, from where you just said, I agree with generalized anxiety disorder that she's been diagnosed with. Answer, no. I said it would be generalized anxiety disorder versus adjustment disorder, and I hadn't had time to fully formulate that opinion out. This whole conversation is about those two issues. It has nothing to do with PTSD or battered spouse. Basically, the judge is saying you're trying to conflate two issues that have nothing to do with each other. Owen said he could see what she was doing, so he made a catch-all statement. Owen says respectfully that isn't what it says. The judge quotes more of the deposition where she says she will answer questions if asked. The judge quickly reads a lot of context. Owen says he wouldn't have taken the deposition if he knew she hadn't formulated those opinions. He asked, why would I take the deposition? The judge says because the court ordered you to take the deposition due to concerns about getting it done and your concerns about what she would say needing to be known before trial. The judge explains we have gone through this with the deposition. The judge reads out case law, why it won't be dismissed, and the judge mentions that he let Owens depose her twice, I believe he said today, which remember, Owens backed down and then went back up. The judge made sure he got a chance. State steps up to supplement the record that it doesn't end at the pages Owens read. There were more, and there was a cross as well. State explains that Owens heard the doctor say there was no imminent danger when Sarah Boone gave her, in Sarah Boone's story she gave. He had a chance to ask her then. What is relevant is different for each person, and it isn't fair to use catch-alls with experts. The state submits they know what their ethical duties are. They have no duty to give him unrecorded testimony, which is consistent with deposition. She did not give any unrecorded statements inconsistent with her testimony. Owens quotes the expert saying he put 2 fingers out and she hit him with the bat. He says that's due to rules of completeness. I don't know what that was about. I feel like Owens just wanted to say something, if I'm being honest. Honestly, most of this feels like theater. It feels like Owens is not talking to a judge, or obviously not the jury's not there. It feels like he's talking to himself or putting on a show. That's my feeling on it. Owens starts to argue. The judge stops him and says, I already ruled. The record states for itself. Motion is denied. asked if they can bring in the jury. State says yes, and defense says no. And it was at this very point I decided on the thumbnail. At this point, to me, Owens is just yelling to the clouds about his opinion. He has to know this is all a waste of time, and he's putting on a show. Now, is that a show for Sarah Boone, or for a future movie adaptation, or for whatever other reason? I guess that's for the watcher to decide. The judge stops him and told him he was going to rule ahead of time. How he was going to rule ahead of time explains the judge agreed with him before the lunch hour. Owens thanks him and then starts a whole new issue. And I don't know if it was due to Owens starting back up, but the judge physically recoiled in his seat. Owens is still arguing against the witness's opinion that she does not believe that PTSD or battered spouse applied at the time of the incident. Judge mentions we went through this, but Owens wants to keep going and just keeps reading. The judge stopped him to explain of how what he's quoting isn't relevant to this case. The judge read case law that will be a case that this will be accepted in case law under Dinkins. Owens wants to read more, and the judge said that it's a certain part. He's already read it. Owens just starts reading. Talk of the battle of upcoming jury instructions. There's a reason I'm kind of preemptively reading these to you, or at least talking about them. The judge says court previously ruled objection is overruled. The judge says the court previously ruled that the objection was overruled. Nothing more. Finally, the jury can return. Owens repeats the question again and refuses to let the expert give a full answer again. So the expert's trying to answer. He wants just yes or no, doesn't want her actual full answer. She gave him the deposition. And at this point, you can feel he's angry. Doctor has not reviewed any videotapes. She says she's read descriptions of body cams, and Owens interrupts her to ask, but it was not the videos. She's not reviewed the audio reports. She has read the description of the autopsy, but not autopsy report. She knows of the previous experts. The previous experts didn't go to medical school, but the state witness did. We now have an approach because Owens is asking the current witness, the state witness, what she said about the medical knowledge of previous witnesses, and that objection is overruled. She says she was talking about psychologists in general, not your witnesses particularly. Owens asked if she says psychologists do therapy and don't normally prescribe medication or understand medical issues, so to speak. Objection overruled. The doctor says again she wasn't meaning your specific experts, it was experts in general of psychology. Owens started to say, but this is what you said. There's an objection sustained. Owens asked if most of her work is incompetency and if most of her work is incompetency to proceed and guardianship evaluations. I'm sorry, I know I'm speaking over myself. Owens says a lot of things. I'm sorry, if you haven't watched this, I recommend you go back and you just catch a couple moments Owens is talking and you get a feel for the whole day. The expert says actually most of her work is in patient care, and she works 7 days a week in a crisis stabilization unit treating patients. To me, that doesn't go over well for Owens. As a forensic psychiatrist, that is the majority of her work, but as a regular psychiatrist, as a forensic psychiatrist, most of her work is the evaluations for competency to proceed in guardianship, but her job as a psychiatrist is 7 days a week. She explains that competency in guardianship is the most common. Sanity at the time of the crime of the offense is second. And at this point, I'm wondering where Owens is going because he just put emphasis on the court. To me, that they can trust her at her opinions on time of the crime because she does sanity stuff. I know this isn't the same thing, but she is saying at the time of the crime, Sarah Boone at the time of the crime, Sarah Boone's possible PTSD or battered spouse syndrome isn't relevant. So it's weird to me he's emphasizing her being an expert on people's minds at the time of the crime when that is what's really going to hurt Sarah here. She testifies weekly in Baker Act Court. Owens interrupts her to get the location. I found that weird. He was really focused on locations. She has testified in battered spouse incidents 5 to 10 times in court. She does not believe Sarah Boone suffers from generalized anxiety disorder, but she was previously diagnosed with it. Owens was asked if she attempted to obtain records. Objection sustained. I don't think it's her job to obtain these records, right? I think it's supposed to be the defense or the prosecution. She diagnosed her with adjustment disorder. A lot of symptoms overlap. She hadn't made up her mind by the time of the deposition. She made the decision in the next week. Owens says You agree you didn't notify me. He's still on this stuff. Objection, approach, objection sustained. Owens asked if she would agree. She wasn't sure during the deposition. She said she believed she said she was leaning to adjustment disorder, secondary to her being in jail, and believes she said this in her deposition. She didn't know if she had enough from her to support generalized anxiety. Owens started to say he's just learning it now. Objection sustained. Owens asks, is this the first time you were letting the parties know that she has adjustment disorder? Yes. She felt Sarah Boone had narcissistic personality trait, grandiose opinions of herself. Owens asks if she agrees a lot of people have that trait but aren't narcissists, and the doctor says she never said Sarah Boone was a narcissist, and it is her opinion that Sarah Boone has alcohol abuse disorder. Sarah has a history of being diagnosed with that. Sarah also said her use had been problematic, and based on the totality of information provided, her diagnosis in the past, her ex-husband's interview describing her as an alcoholic, and Sarah herself saying she had a problem. One of the criteria is having a tolerance. A tolerance can be genetic. I don't know why Owens brought that up. Battered spouse is a recognized syndrome and is a subset of PTSD. Owens asked if she would agree with the name of the woman who came up with the syndrome. She said yes. Owens said you didn't agree you knew it at the time of the deposition. She says she doesn't remember not knowing. Owens wants her to check the page. There's an objection, approach, objection sustained. Owens returns holding up the woman who came up with Battered Spouse's book, asks if she agrees with everything in the book, and the expert says she can't because she hasn't read the book. Sarah was in a violent relationship with Jorge Torres. Do you agree there was a violent cycle that occurred? She said it was described to me that way. Owens said, would you say there was a violent cycle? Again, she says it was described to me in that way. Owens asked if she has an opinion. Objection sustained. Do you have an opinion if there was a violent cycle between Boone and Mr. Torres? Again, she says it was described to her in that way. Do you agree Jorge Torres was the abuser and Sarah Boone was the victim in that? And she said it was a volatile relationship, and in the police report, her ex-husband describes Sarah as the aggressor. This changes the tone, in my opinion, for the rest of this. He's already mad. This changes the tone. Owen holds up his big printouts. She hasn't seen the first photo, but agrees Sarah's injured. It's that head injury. It looks like a little bump, a little like cut on her forehead, maybe. She said it had been healing for a month at the time. She doesn't recall about anything about Jorge Torres using a curtain rod being said by anyone. She hasn't seen any of the other photos. Owens asked if she spent 2.5 hours giving an evaluation of Sarah Boone, and the half of it was a test, and she said no, the test was about 5 minutes. She didn't go through her full 3.5-year relationship with George in those hours. She then went through her notes afterwards. Owens asked if she attempted to see Sarah anymore. Objection, improper, sustained. Again, I don't think that's her job, right? Owens asked if she agrees her opinions are subjective and not based on authority. She said it's based on her education, training, and years of experience, but she does agree it's subjective. She thinks Sarah Boone has battered spouse. Those affected by battered women can have their perception of danger altered. And note, at this point, I caught Owens using woman, and I think that's because she suggested that maybe Sarah Boone is the aggressor. She could be the battering spouse. Victims of repeat violence may fear death when others might not. If someone suffers from battered spouse, they may suffer from a heightened sense of danger. Owens asks if people suffering from depression and anxiety are predisposed to getting into a relationship with a violent partner. They may. She agrees the DSM-5 says PTSD should be considered if there's extreme stress. She didn't test to see if Sarah Boone had PTSD. She was not given enough expert to make an opinion about if she had PTSD. Acts of violence from a partner can cause extreme stress. He asks if she agrees PTSD should be considered, and she says they have to meet the criteria. There is a sense of selflessness in battered spouses. Owen says, do you agree these battered women have learned the probability of receiving can be predicted by cues of the batterers? So he's basically saying, do the battered women see a cue, a tone, something from the batterer and notice something's going to happen? She says yes, but it isn't just women. So she's caught on to the same thing I caught on. She agrees most victims of intimate partner violence are women. More talk about the incident. Owens asks about primal instinct, fight or flight. You don't think about it. Do you agree victims of battered spouse or battered women syndrome suffer from self-isolation, suicidal thought, and substance abuse? And she says they may. Everyone is different. To me, this solidified that James Owens is actually just adding women instead of spouse in his notes when he reads it off. Try to, formulate in the jury's mind, again, women. They may have intrusive memories, high anxiety, all the symptoms that they talked about previously. Owens talks about women being able to psychologically detach from their bodies. I thought that was weird the first time, but the objection to this was sustained. Owens lists a bunch of symptoms at once. Objection sustained, I think, for being so much at once. Now they're just going through symptoms, and they may is the answer to everything, because everything it's different for everyone, right? There's aggressive page flipping from Owens. Owens says, I know she didn't spend more time with her to, what's this? Let me make sure I get this right. Owens said something like about if she spent more time with her, would she be able to get all the answers? Objection sustained. Owens asked if she spent more time, would she be able to make a decision if Sarah Boone had battered spouse? She said she did make that decision. What about PTSD? It's possible. Owens down, time for redirect. So Owens got in his feelings, in my opinion. I think he was, I don't know. I don't know who this was for. To me, he was really aggressive, and I think it came across probably to the jury. Now the state's up. She has dealt with patients that suffer from traumatic disorders every single day, daily basis. 5 to 6 a month that meet the criteria for battled spouse, and that's a lot of months. She's been doing this since 1998. She would have taken more materials when offered, but can't say if more evidence would have changed her opinion, but she would have been receptive to evidence. Did anything in your conversation now with Mr. Owens change your opinion whether when it came to battered spouses applicable to the facts of this incident? Not at all. Why is that? Objection from Owens overruled. Why did your opinion not change? Her recollection of events of them laughing and playing around did not lend itself to any triggers of trauma. State holds up a photo the defense had. It wasn't shown on the feed I was watching, but you'll know what it is in a moment. Does this inform you of what happened? No. Does this inform you of who's the aggressor? No. Same questions for all the photos. So basically that the photos don't show what happened and don't show who was the aggressor for everything. If you were determining the credibility of what happened, would you take into account all the things from the person saying what happened? Yes. The credibility would be taking in everything. Would you take alcohol abuse disorder into account if someone was relaying a history of? Objection, approach, overruled. Yes, it will be taken into account with them being the historian. She didn't test for PTSD, but thinks Sarah Boone meets the criteria for battered spouse, but that doesn't change the opinion she gave on examination. Objection, overruled. Simply because someone is mentally ill, that doesn't make a person legally insane. They used examples of like schizophrenia. Just because someone meets every criteria for battered spouse, that doesn't mean every action against their partner is justified. Even in a violent relationship and suffering from battered spouse, that doesn't mean all actions are justified. Released, possibly to recall. State wants to move something into evidence. Owens is asking questions. It's moved in. Owens gets confused. No objection. Another piece of evidence. No objection. Approach. Now we're going on break because it's probably going to be the really long videos, the body cams, the hours of footage. So with that said, I'm ending here. I'm going to try to eat, get that done. Hopefully I get this all done quickly before things interrupt me. I didn't get interrupted during this, thankfully, and I'll see you in the next part. To me, at this point, Owens is sounding angry. Owens is acting like his case is over, and I don't think it's playing well with the jury. We have a lot to go through for this last part, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the state's request for special jury instruction regarding battered spouse. I'm going to skip away from the arguments because we've all heard them, and I'm just going to show you what the state once said. The special instruction be, you have received testimony regarding battered spouse syndrome. The introduction of battered spouse syndrome evidence to support a self-defense theory is not for the purpose of justifying a person's misconception of reality or to explain why an unreasonable belief was nevertheless justifiable due to her condition. Rather, battered spouse syndrome evidence is used to show why a person's actions were reasonable, to show that in spite of a reasonable perception of danger from the battering spouse, the battered spouse would remain in the home with her batterer, where she may resort to the exertion of force against him to prevent imminent death or greater bodily harm. Now, with that being said, I might drink a lot in this. My throat is very dry and I've been coughing. I've kept a lot of notes and I'm going to do my best. There's a lot of video evidence. As always, the best evidence is going to be watching the videos yourself. I will say the court audio kind of sucks. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to cover what I can, the best I can, and get you all the information I think is the most important. But as always, if you can watch the video, do so. Someone might be able to like FOIA request at some point in the videos we haven't had uploaded before due to redactions and things, and those would be the preferable way to watch them. But let's get into it. So the first video is a 2018 body cam footage where Sarah Boone is also arrested. Now, I have a video on this in my playlist. I've already covered it. It's the Haunting Sarah Boone Arrest Body Cam. I think that's the name I went with. Sarah said she was asked for a cigarette. George got mad at her. They went home. Sarah came home. Sarah said she was caught in the stairwell. He beat her up. I'm kind of paraphrasing here because I've gone through this so many times. Twice, actually, because I also read the arrest report at least twice. Maybe 3 times now. He caught her in the hallway. She doesn't know how she got on the ground. Sarah got kicked in the eye. He used his heel. It's not in my notes, but I want to make this clear. At this point, I want you to remember he used his heel. I want you to take note of all of this evidence we have of Sarah, because you're going to start hearing phrases that are repeated, phrases that are maybe how she formulates her stories rather than how she actually accurately depicts the day, if you understand what I'm saying. If you don't yet, you're going to. If you want to hear it more clear, again, I have it on the video. Next is a 911 call from that night. Sarah said she had the fuck beat out of her. Sarah says, I did not fight back or anything, just a bump on my head. He isn't on the lease. He isn't supposed to be here, but he's here. She says, please don't get me in trouble for this. He just used his fist. Sarah's 911 call does not match up at all with what she told the officer on the scene. She's lying. Somewhere. Now it's the body cam from 6/15/2019. George came over. She let him in. He got pissed. She said she got a beating. He threw her into the closet door. Sarah's showing off camera a lump on her head. Sarah says she got him off the lease to not have him come over. Again, I mentioned the audio is not great. She says something like, you're the 4th one. Then a bit later, she says, go get him. The officer asks about how long they've been dating. Were they currently dating? Sarah isn't giving like a real clear explanation of when they were dating, when they were broken up. She said she had a heel on her face. She says he strangled her multiple times today and she couldn't breathe. She didn't feel herself losing consciousness, though. She said she was arrested before for fighting back, but she didn't fight back. So any injuries that he has aren't from her. I think we're getting a little foreboding here. He didn't hit her with an object. He just threatened her with a bat. Sarah starts talking about having friends. And to me, right now, it's a major red flag because Sarah Boone, if she has these friends, right, why are they not the one they called? People didn't like my description in my poll of the older woman in the wheelchair. But, I mean, what I want to get across was Sarah Boone isn't bringing in people of her own age. She's bringing in an older lady who maybe has some hearing issues, who maybe Sarah might be hoping doesn't have the best memory. I think Sarah went with the only person she could think of that might give her positive testimony, including these people. I think Sarah strategically chose that witness. I don't think that was Owens. I think that was Sarah. And I think partly due to her age, and maybe because she was black. Sarah likes to bring up a racial component, remember? Every time I do this, there's 2 things I'm trying to do. I'm trying to think what Sarah was doing, and trying to think about how if I was on the jury. And also, I guess 3, what I'm also thinking myself, knowing everything. Because the jury still doesn't know it all. George is extremely drunk. He doesn't understand why the police are there. The officer asks, what are these cuts on your neck? So Sarah says she was the one that's choked. She never did anything to George. He has marks on his neck. He does like a swatting away motion with his hands, and he doesn't want to talk about the cut. So to me, I think he's like saying like, I don't know. He's like, don't worry about it. Or is it like him trying to, how he got rid of Sarah, how he got her off of him? I don't know which one he was trying to go for there. But George gets arrested. And he's read his Miranda rights and is asked, what's going on after getting to the car? The officer said, she said you hit her and choked her. He said, what? He says, no, sir. Officer mentioned Sarah's lump, and he said, I don't know. She just hits me, and I don't know. I didn't punch her or hit her. George came over to get his ID, social security card, and birth certificate because Sarah told him he could have it. He was there a while. He said he doesn't know why she decided to go out and call them. He said, I think he says she's nuts. And at this point, you can hear Sarah screaming in the background. Officer said, all he needs to hear is that he hit her, I think. Basically saying, well, she said it. I think that's what he's getting into here is the reason this is going on because she said it and that's all that's needed. At this point, the officer has to start screaming at Sarah to basically shut up and get over there. Sarah was causing an issue, interfering. Sarah is the one who snapped out of nowhere, according to George. She's mad because she took him off the lease, and I told the lease guys I can't cash my check, so please talk to her. So my understanding here is he came over to get his identification because Sarah is keeping it from him, and he can't even cash his check. He can't have money from his job until Sarah gives it back. At least that's what George is saying. The officer sees cuts on him and bruises on her, but George isn't saying what happened, and George is the one in the back of the cop car. Does she hit you? All the time. Who hit first? She does, all the time. What about today? He doesn't know about today. Officer asks if he has ID on him. She has it. Sarah is sitting with two women. Sarah says she doesn't have his ID. He says it's in the house. Sarah claims he threw it in the bushes, from my understanding. And the officer kind of follows her to look, and Sarah asks where George is, and the video ends. Another video starts. Sarah walks out and shakes the officer's hand, says his brother and ranting mother came over. Sarah says it should be in the bush, but she doesn't have it. She doesn't look either. Officer's looking through the bush, and there's sounds of what sounds like George crying in the back of the car. Video ends. Another segment. Sarah says to someone, I love you, and does like finger guns. She's talking like past the officer. They explain to Sarah how she can like record new bruises that show up, and she wants to show everything she has documented, all these videos and photos she has, and she's told no, and she looks really disappointed. Sarah is very drunk. This video is online, by the way. She has like that really like that pouty face. I think I've used that face some in my thumbnails. I have a different thumbnail this time. Sarah looks really disappointed though. Sarah smiles. There won't be anything else because you're taking him down. Put him under the jail. Under the jail. She details things she has photos of, and the officer says you probably shouldn't hang out anymore. Sarah smiles and tells him, I can't understand. Left him 3 weeks ago. Sarah said, I've had to lie to you guys 3 times. Now I'm not lying. And she has a smirk. Then she says, they are going to come kill me. She's talking about George's family. You're starting to catch Sarah's pattern. They tell her to get an injunction against them, and she shakes her head no. Sarah's going to sleep at a neighbor's house. Again, interesting, this neighbor wasn't called by the defense or either the woman earlier. Sarah asks for a hug. He can't. Sarah cries and comes in for a hug anyway, because she flips the switch, right? They do a fist bump. She immediately smiles and tells him to tell George to eat a dick. Then Sarah comes over for a handshake. Another body cam. Sarah is yelling past an officer, telling someone to not leave. Sarah turns to the officer to make sure she isn't getting arrested. Once she learns that, she shouts past the officer again, ignoring him. And then she turns around repeatedly to make faces, sad faces, smile faces. Officer yells at her that he needs to take her statement. She's laughing inside, saying, he never thought I would ever do it. Sarah again asks if she's getting arrested. The officer needs Sarah's ID. She wants the officer to sit on the couch. He says no. She's shouting in the background, glad he's gone. They don't come over here and threaten to kill me. Officer asks who. She says George's mother, brother, father. Sarah gets complaints when they confront her. I'm assuming from the complex. Sarah again asks if she'll be arrested. He asks if she did something where she should be arrested, and she says no. But the last time she fought back. Sarah tells the officer to sit down. Sarah is walking around. You can see her in the mirror. The officer has to direct her to, sit down. Sarah is sitting down finally to write the story. Sarah says they've been drinking. Sarah says what sounds like they had 2 drinks, and this has happened before. On to another folder. 911 call. Sarah says she doesn't have an emergency, but her boyfriend was arrested last Thursday, but came over yesterday. He kicked the bike that she bought for him, but technically it's hers, and he also used her debit card. The 911 operator has to explain to her how gifts work, that it's his now. Sarah says she needs her debit card because her son is coming over. He used the credit card to buy her cigarettes. I assume debit card. So she's saying that George used it to buy her cigarettes, and she needs it back. She wants to give his parents' address, but the 911 says they just need hers. He's technically her boyfriend, but at this point her ex. Sarah is asked about any weapons in the home, and she says a baseball bat. Now, with this being said, you're going to notice a pattern with the 911 calls. Remember, they talked about how much she had to call 911, how much the police had to be there. Now we're getting the reasons why they were there, why they were called. Next 911, Sarah says she doesn't necessarily have an emergency, gives her address, about no contact. He is over here again. And during this, I think I can hear George saying Sarah sometimes. She says something in the fucking pantry. Her dog is deaf. She's yelling at the dog. Sarah's name is Sarah. More dog talking to. She is saying the dog pissed in her pantry and she doesn't need a deputy. She needs to get her dog. They remind her that she called 911. He is here again, urinating in my pantry. Who is this person to you? Sarah says she is okay regardless. I know how it works. I'm okay. Sarah says that's not yours. Sarah asks, what do you want me to do? More yelling at the dogs, and she tells 911 to do what they gotta do, and the call ends. Sounds like Sarah just likes to call 911. Because it gets her control. Next is the body cam. They walk into Sarah's home. Sarah recognizes the deputies from earlier in the day. When they ask what happened, sounds like she says Brian moved it and dropped it. Who called 911? Sarah doesn't say anything. They ask what is happening. Sarah goes outside. Sarah runs out, cheering, her hands in the air. She's putting on faces and voices and said, don't arrest, I think. It's hard to hear. I'm not sure if it was about him or her from the court audio. Officer asks if she's been drinking, and she says a drink. Sarah tries to shut the door, and it stops because there's an officer inside. They need to be able to see him. Sarah's making faces. You can't hear shit on the court audio. I'm sorry. I know I've seen this before clearly. I don't have it to double check. I couldn't find it. It's the video with the basketball hoop outside, if that helps anyone who's doing some digging into body cam footage. Sarah is begging them not to arrest George, but they have to. George got taken out without a shirt or shoes. Asks if he remembers what the judge said about paperwork saying XXXXX. Sarah has the papers. Sarah didn't say it, but the judge did. Basically, they're going through a no contact order, and he's like, but Sarah said. Officer says the judge who matters, she is above Sarah. So it's kind of come out that Sarah invited him over. Now someone called the cops. Sarah's not admitting to it, and he's getting arrested. Paperwork says no contact, or he gets new charges. They've both been drinking. She called them. According to the officer, she called them. He was at work. Sarah called him. So they know that Sarah called him. The officers know Sarah called George. She told him to come and get something. George isn't taken into custody. Sarah is complaining that he's arrested. Sarah says she didn't call. Sarah says, see, I told you. They asked if she called earlier. She sounds like she denies, but he says, we know. They tell Sarah she knows he can't be there. He will see the judge the next day because it's so late. They tell him he can't be over here until the case resolves. Sarah says she will do whatever she can. He says, I love you, babe. Sarah keeps yelling to him. Someone from the complex comes over, seems like management, asks what's going on. No matter if she invites him or not, he can't be over here, and he knows that. And this kind of puts a whole new spin on those no contact orders. Owens really wanted the jury to see them, and he might be regretting it now. It's a reminder of what happened here, that Sarah is inviting this man over and getting him arrested. According to the police, she invited him over. PDF of the photos are next. It's photos of injuries of Sarah and George. Another video. I'm sorry if I'm going fast. There's a lot, and I might have to break in between. I know an interruption's coming any moment now. And I'll get there when I get there. Another video. I'm trying to get this out as soon as I can. Muted at the start was Sarah, obviously talking. So you can't hear her, but she's motioning, right? George is on the couch, drunk it seems. Looks like he might have been asleep. Sarah says, you didn't think I'd call. Keeps mentioning getting punched in the neck. He says, are you kidding me? Sarah says, I told you I wouldn't hesitate. Sarah gives the officer an ID, and you can hear him say, Sarah, are you kidding me? She says, punched me in the neck again. George is taken out. George sounds like he's crying, but it's dark. Then he's read his Miranda warning. They shine a light on his face, and there's tears. George says they weren't fighting. George is yelling to Sarah. Sarah is yelling back. George is asked to explain her bruises, but the officer with the body cam is in the vehicle, so you can't really hear what's going on. And the officer inside is writing Sarah's information. He's yelling for Sarah periodically. Eventually, you can hear it because the door opens. Officer says that George wouldn't give him the story, and now that he's going to go into the car he wants to give it, that isn't how this works. And it ends. So it sounds like George might have been covering for Sarah again. It's my takeaway. That's how I feel. Now it's a PDF, more photos of Sarah. 911 call. Sarah says, it's not technically an emergency, just I'm not there, but he is trying to go home. You can see Owens rubbing his head during this one. Sarah says she can't go home because he is there. There's a no contact order. She is at Brian Boone's house. She doesn't know if he's there or not. He was earlier. Sarah is asked if she wants an escort. Sarah says she wants him to go over and see if he's there first. He locked her out, so he's probably there. So Sarah doesn't want to be there. Sarah won't go over with him there. He doesn't live there, so how is he inside? He has a key he took. He isn't breaking in, he's inside. She doesn't know if he's there, but he knows where she hides the key. Sarah doesn't want to meet him. She sounds drunk to me. She called, asked him to leave. She has an 8-year-old, so she isn't sure what to do. They tell her they can meet her and go with her. Sarah says she's about to get kicked out of the apartment because the police get called and police come so much. She just wants to come home. Deputies are going either way. People will see deputies going. She says, I called a couple of days ago. They did incognito because she's going to get kicked out. Another explanation of what a standby is. She can trespass him, or if there's no contact order, they can remove him. Now, Sarah says she'll be honest. There was an altercation. So now there's an altercation. And she fled on barefoot and went to her former husband's house. Sarah doesn't want the officer to go to Brian Boone's. Sarah doesn't want to be arrested. She says she doesn't want to be arrested, but she did fight back. I'm not going to lie. Any arrests are up to the deputy. So right now, what it is you want to do, they'll have a deputy call her and she can talk about it with a deputy. And then we move on to video of the same night. Police approach the apartment. They ask Sarah for ID. I think she shakes her head. Probably maybe it's inside. Knock on door. They're shining lights around. Sarah thinks he's inside, but they'll need keys to check. They ask if he's an ex. What is the layout of the house? He has a bike, not a vehicle. They see movement, but it could be the dogs. Sarah says if both doors are locked, he has to be in there, unless he took her spare key, but he probably did take the spare key. He has to be in. They're opening it, and they breach the door, and they have guns drawn. They sweep the house with the guns drawn, and they find him drunk in the bathroom upstairs. He is incredibly thin. He has guns drawn on him. He's being detained, and he asks why. They turn on the light. He says he doesn't remember what happened. They had a discussion, and as usual, I am in the wrong. I think something was said about a no contact order, and he says no. He got out maybe 3 days ago. He doesn't know his days. They talked, and they came back here. He doesn't know what happened tonight. They asked if he was hiding in the bathroom. He says she always freaking starts stuff and puts it on me all the time. They said that doesn't explain what happened. Both of you are being vague. Officer says this isn't the first incident, and she has been arrested as well. Both have been drinking. They can smell it on her. Honestly, it kind of sounds like they have a feeling that maybe something's happening to George. That's my vibe here. They think Sarah is doing something. Maybe she's not innocent in all this. Officer has to go to the front door after going downstairs. It's Sarah. She wants water. I gotta say, I got so much shit for pointing out her doing that on the body cams, and I feel so vindicated. Sarah Boone just keeps repeating words and actions and statements every time. Anytime she's stressed and she doesn't know what to do, or she's it's all like a play, if that makes sense. It feels like an actor. She was told she has to wait. George says he wasn't injured today. If you don't want help, the officer said, if you don't help me, I can't help you. You can hear George just sounding defeated. He wants to know what she's saying, and they can't tell him. He said, I am in the wrong right now. You're going to take me in no matter what. And it sounds like learned helplessness, if we're using terms from the trial. They said, that isn't necessarily true. I take girls into jail all the time. He says, you're going to take me in because of the no contact. He knows what it said. It said I'm fucked. A judge said to have no contact with her at all. He asked to have shoes, and they get him shoes. Next moment is outside. They're asking Sarah about George's phone because he says she has it, and she said she doesn't know where that is. Sarah is saying George has her car keys. He has nothing on her. She asks about her dogs. Parties approach. There's an hour of footage left, I guess, and the jury can only stay till 5:30. Juror has to leave by 5:30. So they are staying until 5:30. There's an instruction for the last few that edited portions can't impact how evidence is considered. I think the previous ones were edited, not the new ones, but the instruction was given now. Okay, so this is where things kind of take a turn. Where if I get interrupted, I'm going to just probably edit this and restart, because I think these are the most important, and they were saved for last for a reason. George is just sitting there. The metadata is 12/3/2019, 2:05 p.m. And he says, when you leave the house, let me know where you are going. Sarah says, I get to leave the house? He says, yes, just let me know where you are going. And so he knows where she's at. Anything else to add? I love you. So it isn't just yank me back into the house and say, sit the fuck down. No, just let me know where you're going. And if you don't come back no certain time, you're a grown-up. I just want to know that if it does surpass a certain time, I know where you're at, so I can go and she says, so I'm allowed to have friends. He said, nobody said you can't have friends. She said, so I can go see Boo. I think it's Boo. And he says, you can see whoever. I just don't want you frolicking with male friends by yourself, because you know what has happened already. So remember how Sarah Boone said that porn was cheating? Sounds like Sarah Boone was the cheater. Physically. Very obvious insinuation here. Sarah Boone was having this recorded because until that moment, you might think he's being a controlling boyfriend. And she says, I get to go see Boo. He says, I don't care about Boo. Do you understand what I'm saying, though, when it ends? Now, to me, what this sounds like, the way I heard it, the way I got it when taking the whole thing in, it's an angry partner giving ground rules for if you want this relationship to continue because you were caught cheating, here are the rules. Now, Sarah is interrupting him, saying things that he didn't say, but what she didn't do is she didn't correct him when he implicated her in cheating. Now, some people say, well, it's controlling for him to say that even if she cheated. That's fine. And that's fine for Sarah to say that. But in that instance, George probably would have left her because he had drawn a line. He had found a line. Sarah didn't like there was a line for her. The lines are just for him. We'll get more to that. So the next one is 9 days later, 12/12/19. George is smoking inside. Sarah says, hi, fuck you, into his phone. George says he doesn't know what she's talking about. Sarah says, tell everyone you just got crumpled on the bike, or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what she's saying, but George doesn't like the word crumpled. George says, this is and tells her to stop putting it up close to his face. Sarah bum rushed him. The choice was to beat your ass or get my ass beat. Sarah says no. He says he likes the word twat, and he was trying to get some from that woman. And he's like, I think he's filming Sarah. Sounds like Sarah then banged on something to get his attention that you can't see on camera. She's very like zoomed in on him, and she keeps getting closer right up to his face. George is recording, it looks like. He says, I've been trying to get some of that. She's trying to film me, filming her, blah, blah, blah. She's cool with me. She's beyond cool with me. Sarah asked if he was serious today, I think. Something about, I thought a beach, but could be bruise. Maybe I'm mishearing. And he says, I blame it on you, sorry. What are you filming? Why are you filming me filming you? What is this thing? What is this thing you have done? What is this thing you have done? That's the question from Sarah. And he says, man, I watched porno. I was watching porn and she didn't like that. I'm not, and he says it and he's like, I'm not shrugging my shoulders like it isn't a big deal. I think he was reacting to Sarah and trying to placate her because he could tell something was building up. After you begged and pleaded and cried, Sarah's saying, kind of half shouting. Yeah, I trust you. Sarah then screams, say it! George says that she begged. Sarah jumps in and says, I didn't, you did. Well, whatever, I did. Sarah says, say it again. I begged, I pleaded, I cried for you to trust me. Sarah is loudly coaching him through each word. Sarah asked, did you? Did I watch porno again? Yes, I did. Sarah says, good, and ends the video. So you can tell Sarah is collecting these for some reason. Why? Well, we know she tried to turn over these to the police. And it sounds like she's misconstruing what happens and beating down George until he agrees with her for her video. Another video. 12/29/2019. Sarah is saying, so you remember this. George is on the ground with like eyes partially shut, knees up to his chest. Are you drunk right now? How much alcohol did you drink? He says, not enough to get drunk. She says, you're slurring your words and sleeping up against the side of a door. Did I not tell you to not bother me? So what did you do? What time is it right now? It's 1:20 a.m. He said, I haven't bothered you since then. I was sleeping. So it seems that Sarah just woke him up for the video to complain that he bothered her. Why did I ask you to not bother me? Work tomorrow? No. Sarah says she's been up since 4 a.m. when you fucked with me. Sarah says she knows how much vodka was in the bottle. How much was in it? One more drink. Sarah says the bottle is empty, enough for 2 people to have a really good time. Those words, huh? Who drank it? George says I did. Sarah wanted to be documented that that I'm leaving you and you're getting out. George says nobody is leaving, nobody stopped. During all of this, he's crumpled on the floor on the ground still. The reason he was downstairs to get drunk is because he didn't give a shit about her. Special things she keeps on the front of her phone so she remembers to tell him about it because of how special and fun it is. I always bother you. So Sarah's like, you don't care about my special things I have to tell you. Yesterday was my first day at work, remember? I spent 90% of that about hearing about your day and 10% about mine. George says she doesn't bother him sometimes, you just overwhelm him. She says it was her first day of work, and he says that it's about everything else too. She goes, so I'm overwhelming you, telling you about the 4th highest paying baseball player that is a client of ours? And George just kind of sits there and goes, I'm not starstruck. Sarah says, I don't even know who the guy is. She goes, so you fully admit now you didn't care and brushed me off in the car in a midway sentence because you aren't into... He goes, Sarah, you wanted to go to sleep. She said, go downstairs. I'm leaving you. I'm going to try to cancel plane tickets because I don't need special things for people like you that are doing this to me. I wanted to go to sleep and stay to sleep. She deepens her voice. So I told you not to step foot in the bedroom. So what did you do? She goes, nevertheless, you are drunk. I can smell you from the bed before you actually got up. I can smell you from here. You're despicable. He said, I didn't do anything. Leave me alone. She says, you're not going to remember shit. I'm not doing anything. Sarah says, get away from me. Get away from me. He gets up. She says, you do everything to me all the time. Heartache is pain is what you cause. He's trying to go down the steps and she's saying this. He stops on the steps asking how. Just keeps going. The moment he starts to go down again, she says, I dare you. I dare you. You get on your fucking little bike and go to fucking work tomorrow. Don't look at me. Don't come close to me. Don't touch me. Do you understand? He says, what do you mean? She says, as of this moment, until I can get you out. And he goes to take the phone because she's putting it in his face. And he's tired of it. He's drunk. She's screaming at him. She woke him up. Sarah says, I'm going to scream bloody murder. He says, go ahead, scream. She says, I'll scream bloody murder. He says, do it. He says, Sarah says, I'm going to fucking hurt you. Sarah just said she's going to fucking hurt George. He said, nobody is doing anything. And you're filming it. So George at this moment knows, call them. Call them. I'm going to speak for George at the moment, some extra words. You're the dumbass who filmed this, proving what you're doing. Proving you're going to fake crying bloody murder. You just threatened me. Call them. Right? He doesn't use all those words. He's drunk, but we know. Sarah tells him to please get away and changes her tone to a completely different one. The one she uses for sympathy with the police. You know, that, get away from me. My opinion is she was going to cut the video at some point if she called the cops. He said, I am. What the hell is your malfunction? And she says, you. He says, the malfunction's you. And she says, whatever you say. So George is going down the stairs again. And while partway down, Sarah says the whole hallway reeks of you up here. First it's shit, and now it's alcohol. George comes back up, and she says, don't step foot in this bedroom. I can't even breathe. It's disgusting. George stands there for a bit and goes down the steps. Says, keep filming. Or whatever the fuck you want to do. Love you, though. Sarah says, I don't love you. I don't like you. I don't want to be with you. George stands there silently, walks down, looks back like he's going to say something, keeps going, gets to the bottom, looks back. Sarah shuts off the lights and you can hear her walking away. I thought that might be one of the worst ones we see, right? Sarah threatening him, manufacturing evidence, in my opinion. But there's more. 12/29/2019, 4:04 p.m. George says he isn't going to have no Hindenburg situation, no Titanic situation. Yes, I am missing my mustache, and later it all will go. Truth and facts, all will be missing. We'll take a video later when it happens. Love you all, whoever is watching this video. Sarah says, no, that's not approved. He says the FDA says it's approved. So it's going to be a good day all day? That's what Sarah asks. It's going to be a good day? You know. He says, yes. Even when, I don't know what I was typing here. Even when share all of this, yes. All day, yes. It will be an amazing day. He says, you can stop filming now. Not good enough. So basically, she's coaching him to what to say about the day. Not good enough, it's a good day. And he says, it's going to be a great day. It's a great day to have a great day. Cut. And he's like, making the cut thing. Sarah puts it right up into his face and he pushes it back saying, can you not? So this is starting to sound like this great day, good day is like a ritual for Sarah where she controls him, makes him say these words. She wants to get it on video and it's her defense. It's her go-to defense. We've heard it. Next is 3/20/20, 2:48 p.m. Sarah is outside filming George inside. Can't understand what George is saying, but other than I'm going to shit. I don't know. George is setting up music to listen to and it ends. I'm really not sure what this was about, but it kind of makes sense later. Remember, Sarah didn't like his music. She wanted her music. And if I'm remembering right, this next one, it sounds like it's about her music and George doesn't like it. Next is 1/19/2020. Sarah says time. George is sitting silent smoking. He says sirens, sirens, sirens. Sarah asks, how about you get an umbrella and crawl under it? Maybe, I don't know. I couldn't understand it. George says, how about we forget all that? Sarah says, I I'll never be. George says, how about we keep going on? How about when Beautiful is here? I might be mishearing. We don't listen to none of that. I don't want to hear your sirens. I don't want to listen to that. It's every day. Beeping, and we hear enough of it in reality. And Sarah just goes, snaps, basically. It sounds like a little snappy comment. Are you going to be nice today? George gets kind of sheepish immediately and says, yes, I promise you. Sarah yells, go for a walk. By myself? Yes. He says no. Sarah says, go for a walk. He said, I'm going to chill out. Sarah says, don't ever be a woman. He asks, how can I be a woman? Don't ever. But I can somewhat understand, don't ever. I can somewhat understand where you're coming from, but when a challenge, it's like right now, it's too much. So to me, it sounds like she's like, when he was looking sad and like, depressed listening to her because she's abusive, don't be a woman. That's the way I took it. Maybe I'm wrong. Sounds like she recognized how bad she looked. So she, instead of, toning back, she did more Sarah. But we had a blast with them. Then you got out of sorts. So he's saying we had a blast. Sarah said you got out of sorts. George asks, I did? And puts his hand to his chest like, what? And it seems genuine. She said, you stole my phone and called Bren? Maybe the name's wrong. Again, it's hard to hear. What are you saying I got out of sorts? You pushed me. He said, I didn't push you. Why am I getting out of sorts all of a sudden? You did too. You were upset. I didn't drink too much. Sarah says, get your fucktard shit. He says, my what? She says, your retard paper. George sits silently. Sarah says, don't hit women. George asks, if I hit you? No. So where are you going with this? And he starts smoking. Sarah says, I'm turning this off. George says, I don't care. You can film me, take a picture, whatever. I'm not doing anything to you, Sarah. She says, that's my name. Don't wear it out. I'm not doing anything to you, Sarah. And Sarah says, yet? He says, I will not. And the video ends. At this point, they have to take a break because there's just a couple videos left. We're really close to the end, and they need to make sure the jury can be there for it. 20/22/2020, 11:42 p.m. Sarah is at the bottom of what looks like steps. She said, this is what happens if she films herself going up her stairs. I'm going up the stairs where my car keys are because he takes them all the time. Sarah goes in the bedroom and asks where are her car keys. George is in bed. George says, where they always are at. Sarah says, nope, you took them. He says he didn't take them. She asks, where are my car keys? He tries to say where they are, and she interrupts him. He says they are in. She interrupts him and says, no, they aren't. I saw you walk away with them. He goes, why would I take your freaking car keys? She goes, what, you aren't going to curse now? George asks, what are you talking about? You took my car keys. He said, I didn't take your car keys. You did. And the video ends. So now they go back to a video not in order. This is 12/29/2019. So this is the same day as unless I wrote the time down wrong. The same day of him being on the ground upstairs. So this is the same day he was like on the ground and then went down the steps and she was yelling at him and all that. George is sitting in the dark in silence, and he lights a cigarette. He says, I'm going to go to court and tell the judge my fiance has nothing to do with this. It was all my fault. We were both drinking and it got out of hand. Isolated incident. It has never happened before. I love my fiance. She is a good woman. Never been in trouble in her life. Has 7-year-old son she loves and cherishes. Sarah shouts, interrupting. And a blind Boston Terrier. And at this point, I knew what was happening. This is Sarah giving him a forced story. And if I'm understanding the times right, the night before she did all that shit upstairs with him being drunk and him going down the steps and all that, she's going to kick him out. And if my time frame is right, I think this is after. I think this is her demand to not kick him out. He says she has 2 dogs. One is blind, one is deaf. She will stop and help injured animals. We both love each other. We both live together. Yes, every relationship has their arguments, but we are not the type of people that you guys have portrayed us to be. She says, she especially. He says, especially her. So please, if you can. Sarah jumps in to say dismiss. He says dismiss. Sarah says close. He says drop. She says, not that type of person. Sarah Boone says good person. He says a good person. Sarah Boone says angel. George says, I don't know if she's an angel, but close to it. Sarah Boone says, best thing that ever happened to me. George says, yes, ma'am. And I love you to death, and I hate we are going through this right now. Sarah says something, and George is also confused what she wants him to say. He asks, what do you want me to say? He said, and then he said, God will prevail and take us out of the situation. Video ends. That's it for today. What's left is a PDF. Owens says he doesn't think they're going to put on a certain rebuttal, but they'll think on it, they'll stew on it, but knows anticipated. The judge is going to let him think. It sounds like the defense isn't going to have a rebuttal. Sarah looked terrified, drank her little cup of water. Talk of jury instructions. The judge suggests they work on them at 8 a.m. tomorrow. State's fine with it. Defense wants to do it now, but the jury's gone. Closing arguments start at 1. Judge says that's possible to, maybe do it. They end up deciding 8:30 a.m. Sarah Boone is not smiling while leaving. Hopefully, I got the story across the best I could. To me, this was a very damning display. And I think the fact they ended with her coaching him, it got progressively worse. We got to see him getting arrested. He didn't want to say anything for Sarah. We got to hear the 911 calls that weren't relevant. We got to see all of this. We got to hear Sarah Boone just causing issues on her own recordings. You can tell why she's taking these recordings. George comes across as the abused. And after watching this, having access to the same videos, more videos, access to everything on that phone, the state's going to have a PDF where they're going to read text messages. And the defense, with the same information, from what it appears to me, are not going to show anything. The defense is saying they don't have anything actually making George look bad. What do you think? I think I'm not excited to get up at 8:30 in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I'm going to struggle. If you didn't see it, I think I'm going to put a small clip from today at the very start of the video. Maybe come back and watch it. Since we're at the end, I'll say it now. When the video ends, you can restart it and see it if you'd like. Maybe you missed it. Just for people that don't catch the preview, to give them an idea of what's going to happen. I talked to some people about this case that thought maybe Sarah was the more abused. They were watching this live. Just a couple people. Not experts in anything. Their opinion changed. I think people were worried about the domestic violence victim siding with Sarah. I feel like a lot of this was for her. Not Sarah, the juror. I feel like that juror is going to feel George. Jury can go either way. They always can. They can always surprise people. If I was on the jury, I don't see how I could. Because if anything, just thinking of what was shown in the trial, it's damning. And at the end of the day, Sarah Boone's defense is reliant on you have to trust Sarah. The woman who lies, the woman who tells stories, the woman who concocts stories, the woman who records things and takes photos to what? Possibly misconstrue later? Sarah filmed herself being the abuser. To me, It feels like she enjoyed the power. And that led to her killing George. As always, thank you, everyone. You can like, you can comment, you can subscribe. I'll have the links in the pinned comment if you wanted to support me. I'm going to be honest, I try to make it as lighthearted as possible, but you can't with these videos. They are what they are. And I don't know what else to say tonight.